Inside Pablo Escobar's $10 billion abandoned mansions. Pablo Emilio Escobar is a drug lord who was born in 1949 in the city of Rio. He eventually grew from his middle-class upbringing into one of the world's wealthiest men. And how did he manage to do that? Well, he was very good at his job. And the job was moving tons of illegal drugs across the world. Here in this video, we are not talking about his business or how he did all that. We are here to take a look at the incredibly decked out, insane mansions he built with his illicit wealth. So stay tuned. Hacienda Nápoles. At the height of Pablo Escobar's drug operations, it was estimated that he was moving over 15 tons of cocaine into the United States every single day and made around $810 a second. In fact, he loved getting high so much that he bought himself 15 private jets and 6 helicopters. So what sort of house would he buy with a penchant for lavish spending? The answer for that is not just one house. There were several supermansions he owned around the Americas, and one such house is the Hacienda Nápoles. This is Escobar's most luxurious house, built in Puerto Triunfo, Colombia. The mansion covered an insane 7.7 square miles of land, which is even bigger than Disneyland. The mansion included a Spanish colonial house, a sculpture park, and a zoo that housed exotic animals. There was a bull ring, a car racing track, and a private airport, and still had enough space to store his massive collection of vintage and luxury cars. However, following Pablo Escobar's death in 1993, many of the original buildings on the property were demolished or reconditioned for other purposes, and it is now being converted into a family-friendly theme park. Casa Malca. Next, we have Casa Malca. This was one of Pablo Escobar's seaside escapes, and what an escape it is! The mansion is built on the side of the beach. It is said that Pablo wouldn't spend all of his time in this house, which is a little surprising considering how beautifully it is designed. Taking a walk on the Tulum beach is enough to understand why Casa Malca was placed here in the first place. However, after Pablo Escobar's death in 1993, it was abandoned for almost 2 decades until it was discovered and purchased by Leo Malca in 2012. The end of the world wasn't about to stop him. After years of hard work, the doors of Casa Malca have opened once again, but this time inviting guests from all over the world. It was converted into a 5-star luxury art hotel. When reopened, Casa Malca was not like what it used to be. It was filled with art from artists like Keith Haring and Kenny Scharf, which provides a wonderful escape for anyone lucky enough to be a guest there. La Manuela. Then we have La Manuela. Have you ever felt the urge to get away from all the things happening in your life and go to a serene location near the ocean and just relax? Well, Pablo Escobar felt the same way, so he decided to build a 20-acre lavish estate in the resort town Tapa and name it after his daughter. The mansion consists of a massive pool, tennis courts, a helipad which is big enough to play football on, horse stables for when you want to ride nature and not just look at it, a seaplane dock, imported trees for when you get bored looking at regular trees, and guard towers, because you weren't getting in there without his permission. As beautiful as La Manuela was, just 8 months before the death of Pablo Escobar, he was attacked by some of his enemies, and during the attack, 200 kilograms of TNT were stuffed into one of its bathrooms and detonated. After that, La Manuela was abandoned and slowly reclaimed by nature. It is currently dilapidated and covered in plants. It is now converted into a bar, and people are welcome to play paintball. La Casa Grande. Next on our list is his big house, La Casa Grande. This house is built on a tiny island called La Isla Grande, somewhere in the Caribbean, and it is only accessible by boats from Cartagena. Locals of the island call it La Casa Grande, which is very accurate, to say the least at its height. La Casa Grande was so big that it had over 300 exquisitely furnished rooms, with a solid gold shower head in every single bathroom. And La Casa Grande was once Pablo Escobar's premier party villa long before it had been abandoned. Its splendid white walls are now dilapidated, his rooms overrun by plant life. There are no more speedboats docking at its pier, and no more rowdy parties going deep into the night. La Casa Grande is like an empty husk that lost its former glory. That is because, unfortunately, La Casa Grande did not receive the Hacienda Napoles treatment, and it has continued to be left abandoned. You won't find any signs pointing to this massive villa. You won't even find it on Google Maps. Hotel Escobar. Even though Pablo was carrying out all kinds of illegal business in his life, he never wanted to end up in prison. So he used his wealth and influence to convince local authorities to allow him to build his own prison. Now remember, this is Pablo Escobar we are talking about, so of course this wasn't your typical government-sanctioned self-built prison. This prison wasn't exactly built to keep Pablo in, but to keep enemies out. It was constructed on a foggy mountainside to prevent any attacks by air, and was guarded by men whom Pablo specifically picked. The prison was called Hotel Escobar, and the name came for a reason. This 5-star prison was replete with every modern convenience Pablo could imagine. He had a casino for gambling with the men he hired to guard him, a football field where he wants to have the Colombian national team play a game with him, and a spa to relax and unwind after a long day of being in prison. Pablo was hosting many parties, and there were many guests visiting inside his luxurious prison. It had enough luxuriously furnished rooms to have guests sleep over. And also, he outfitted his prison with state-of-the-art communication devices, allowing him to run his drug empire from the prison. Hotel Escobar was just a slightly more discreet version of any of his mansions. Ironically, the prison that once housed the most dangerous and powerful drug lord ever has been converted into a monastery. Monaco Building. Pablo Escobar was a man of incredible amounts of wealth, allowing him to acquire and build several properties in different countries. But not every one of them was a super mansion. For example, in Medellin, he had a completely less outrageous bit of property called the Monaco Building. It might not have been the size of a small theme park or a fortress in the mountains, but the Monaco Building was nothing to sneeze at. Living in this building in its heyday would have had you feeling pretty up there. And that's not just a cocaine residue. It was a gray 6-story tall building, very well furnished, and at the top of it sat a decked out penthouse, which Pablo saved for himself. The Monaco Building was occupied by Pablo Escobar for years until 1988, when it was bombed by a rival cartel. It was then abandoned for decades, and after the death of Pablo, the Monaco Building became a tourist site. People would come to see where the famed drug lord had once lived. In 2018, it was demolished by city officials in an attempt to move past a painful history that the building represented, and has since been turned into a memorial for the victims of Pablo Escobar.